We'll start off with Gutter Rich 10. He says, beat Georgia. Dabo doesn't understand trends. He allowed the program to fall out the trendy brand stage. He doesn't understand what these kids want outside of money. I can't agree with that. Clemson does have a certain type of kid that they tend to go after. They have a pretty good understanding of, you know, they're not. I mean, Dabo has said it multiple times. Clemson is not everything to everyone. I think he realizes that, and that's why they are so selective with how they recruit and where they recruit, and what type of situations they recruit, because that's just kind of the reality. Not every and that's not that the kids that they don't go after are bad, or you shouldn't want them in your program. But they have a very Dabo has a very clear understanding about what he wants in a recruit, and so I think that appeals to. I think his messaging still appeals to a lot of kids. I think we're kind of caught up in the moment of the lack of recruiting success in the last couple of weeks, and taking it as a whole big picture thing where Clemson just doesn't have what it takes to they don't know what kids want nowadays. I don't think that's it. I just that's not at all the case, and so I can't agree with this. I know why people feel this way, and it's kind of a reactionary type of thing, but I can't get behind it. All right, Wendell, he says Dabo won't hold on. Okay, Dabo won't use NIL to attract players, only to retain them. We will continue to miss out on guys we want. Now, has Clemson lost guys that they that have ultimately come down to NIL recruitments? Absolutely. I mean, it's happening to everybody. Like, this is, I think, one thing that the fan base, and this is not just a Clemson thing. This is every fan base thing. They kind of get caught up in their whole bubble, and when things don't go their way, it's like it's a fault of the program, and we're not doing something right. But this is happening everywhere, and I can assure you, like, the guys that Clemson missed out on, not all of them came down to money. Like, that's not the case. Um, sometimes you just don't get a kid because a program just they presented something, a more attractive product, whether it is money or whether it's you know development, whatever you name, campus culture. All of those things still matter when a kid is deciding where they want to play for the next 3-4 years. So I just, you're right that like Clemson tends to use the majority of their NIL for player retention, and not so much the portal and recruiting. But their their reluctance, I don't want to say unwillingness, but their reluctance to fully dive in from an NIL standpoint in recruiting is not the reason they're missing out on so many guys. That's just not the case. Clemson does need to do better. I think there is a middle ground there. I do think Clemson can and should do better from an NIL standpoint, but I don't think it's as dire as some people would like to make it.
Yeah, that, and look, I think the NIL thing is an interesting conversation, and we should probably do a segment on it in an upcoming episode, Jordan, and just kind of talk through Clemson's NIL situation and really what it is. And the long and short of it is, honestly, a lot of us don't know what Clemson's NIL situation is. Like, everybody speaks very matter of factly about Clemson not offering recruits NIL, but none of these people actually know what Clemson is offering these individual high school recruits.
Yes.
I don't know. None of these numbers are publicly reported. So I do know that it has been said a lot, and I think that they use majority of their NIL funds on retaining their roster, which clearly works because Clemson is one of the best universities at retaining their roster. Now, can Clemson do a much better job at maybe raising some more NIL funds so there's more to go around? I think there's a conversation to be had there. I think there's possibly a messaging issue and maybe a driving of funds issue with NIL, and maybe that's an issue at Clemson. I don't know, but I think NIL is a piece of it, but I don't think at the end of the day, Clemson's NIL funds are not unlimited, but neither is any other university. So some of these numbers that I think get pumped out into the media a lot of times, I don't know if they're real or not. And I think it's hard to know whether they're real or not, because if you just go off some of these numbers that are being thrown around with some recruits, like, I mean, if these universities are pumping out those numbers for all these recruits they're landing, that's amazing, dude. They must
Yeah.
have the most robust, automatically refilling NIL funds that anybody has. And there may be some universities out there that have really deep pockets when it comes to NIL. But what people don't understand is it is a completely different pot of money, right?
Yeah.
Than anything else that you donate to. So if you're a Clemson donor, right, and you donate to Clemson regularly, well, only money that the money that can be used for NIL is the money specifically donated to NIL, right?
Right.
So I think
So
that's
your IPTAY, your IPTAY is not funding your
there
NIL.
you
Like
go. Yeah,
that's not
that's a,
what's
that's a perfect example. Yeah, your
yeah.
IPTAY funds, your IPTAY funds do not fund NIL, right? Like the so and so donated $3 million to have a cornerstone on a building.
Yeah.
That money can't go to NIL, right?
Right.
Like, so I think maybe people don't understand, because I didn't really understand until I looked into it, that money doesn't go to NIL, right? And it can't be used for NIL in any way, shape, or form. So I think that's part of the issue. And then getting into bidding wars when you're at a university like Clemson, who maybe has a smaller alumni base, who maybe has a smaller NIL funds than maybe some of your bigger. Let's just throw Ohio State out there, just because they've been in the news most recently with throwing out NIL deals so often. So a university like them may have a lot more to pick from. So if you're Clemson, at the end of the day, there's only so much money to go around, right? So you have to divvy it up in a way that you think is best and that benefits the program the most. You can't go give X quarterback um, a $5 million NIL deal, and then go give X running back a $1 million NIL deal, and then go give X tackle a $3 million NIL. Like, eventually, like, there's no NIL money left.
Right.
So I think that's some of the things that people don't think about when it comes to NIL, and how well Clemson's doing raising NIL funds. I don't know. And that's definitely a question and a conversation that probably needs to be had. But I think there's a lot that goes into it.